The following presentation was made possible by the generous support of Ernst & Young and Park Davis, a division of Warner Lambert Company.
It's an English word or a French word or a Greek word, comes from the Greek word, except the application was mine. I was looking for a word and couldn't find any. And therefore, I don't know, I was working then on a biblical story on Isaac, and the word Holocaust is mentioned, the burnt offering. And it touched me that it had all the elements, the fire, the solitude, the inexorable process of moving the entire story towards death and death alone.
Elie Wiesel was the first person to use the word Holocaust to describe the deaths of 6 million Jews in Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War. That use of the word has now entered our vocabulary and is spoken with horror throughout the world to conjure up a period of mass murder unprecedented in human history. Wiesel, a survivor of the camps, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1986 for a lifetime's work writing, teaching, and campaigning for human rights. The Nobel citation called him a messenger to mankind. His message was founded in what happened to him over 40 years earlier.
Oh, not only to me, it happened to the whole world. It happened to history. It happened to God, maybe.
Wiesel, one of 4 children, was born here in Sighet, Romania in 1928. He grew up in a very religious Jewish community. But when he was just 14 years old, his life was shattered. With the war almost over, the Nazis deported Sighet's entire Jewish population. Their destination? Hitler's infamous death camps. The Wiesels found themselves first at Auschwitz, where Elie's mother and younger sister were to die, then later at Buchenwald, where his father was also to perish. Somehow, the young Elie survived, but he was scarred forever.
I rarely speak about that. I've written one book about my experiences, a very small book called Night. Even that little book, I couldn't write it that easily. It took me 10 years to decide to write the first book. Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp, which has turned my life into one long night, 7 times cursed and 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never shall I forget the little faces of the children, whose bodies I saw turned into wreaths of smoke beneath a silent blue sky. Never shall I forget those flames, which consumed my fate forever. Never shall I forget that nocturnal silence, which deprived me for all eternity of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments which murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to dust. Never shall I forget these things, even if I am condemned to live as long as God himself. Never.
Night. It's been described as a memoir of outrage. But did writing it ease Wiesel's pain and suffering?
It did not. I think just the opposite. It increased the pressure. For until then, I thought if I could speak, I would say certain important things. Now I have spoken, and I was wondering, have I used the right words? Have I said what I had to say, what needed to be said? Was I a true witness? So the pressure increased much more. I was very naive, but I was convinced that if we could tell the tale for the sake of the living as much as for the sake of the dead. There would be no more war, no more hatred, because we know, I thought, now we know that hatred means Auschwitz, that war means ugliness, that fanaticism ultimately leads into cruelty, that anti-Semitism means Treblinka. It was a simplification of all the metaphysical notions I ever had, thinking now we know, and this knowledge may either crush us or redeem us. And of course I had hoped that the world would be redeemed. Now I go through contradictory moods. There is a moment when I am ecstatic because I feel, well, we have saved one person because of the story. And the next moment I'm in total despair. Look, there's so much to do and we cannot do it because people don't want to understand, don't want to remember, don't want to listen.
Elie Wiesel made it his life's work to make sure that people do listen. He worked from his Manhattan apartment with the help of Secretary Martha Hauptmann and his wife, Marion. He campaigned for, among others, Cambodian refugees, Mosquito Indians, and the starving children of Africa. He traveled the world cajoling, pleading, bearing his message of peace. Lining his walls was a vast library of books, stories of the Holocaust, horror upon horror, reminding him of his own humiliation. One wondered, why did he read them?
First, because I owe it to them. If somebody speaks, it's my duty to listen. Second, I always hope that I will find something new, something that will explain to me things that I cannot understand even now. All the stories are almost the same story. All the killings took place in the same way. They came into a ghetto and they used the same psychological warfare to lure the victims into passivity. Everywhere it was the same. And often I had the feeling that actually they killed only one Jew 6 million times.
Wiesel, a deeply religious man, frequently visited one of his oldest and closest friends, Rabbi Menashe Klein, whom he first met when he was 14.
We were in Auschwitz together. Then, when Auschwitz was evacuated, we marched together, what we call the Death March. We took the train together, the open train in the snow, to Buchenwald. We were in Buchenwald together. We were liberated together. We came to France together, and we lived together in the same home for orphans.
In 1947, they parted company. Klein went to the States, where he became a rabbi. Wiesel moved to New York 15 years later, via a journalistic career in Europe and Israel. By the time he won the prize, Wiesel had written some 30 books, all in French, many translated by his wife, Marion.
Well, I translate for him, and in a sense, that doesn't really mean that we work together. We work one after the other, meaning that I work after him. Once he finishes with the work in French, he divorces it in a way, and he hands it over to me, and then it's my baby. And I translate it into English. Translation is always a difficult task, because you're not just translating words, you're translating thoughts, ideas, and it's difficult, but I love it. And I have a wonderful way of testing whether I'm on the right track. If I can hear his voice saying what I'm translating, I know I'm okay.
You must remember Russian Jewry.
Russian Jewry, another cause to fight for. The platform this time, the Jewish Civil Servants Convention in New York, where Wiesel was presented with their Man of the Year award.
Of complicity. Then you mentioned, all of you, my work for...
But he didn't only speak at large public gatherings. He also taught college students. The subject today, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
My priorities are teaching But the writer in me is a teacher, and the teacher in me is a writer. And my hope is only that both the writer and the teacher somehow meet. And when they meet, that they should also meet the words that I need to say certain things about certain people for a certain purpose.
Wiesel, the writer, had often been nominated for Nobel's Literature Prize. Was that an award he would have preferred?
Of course, every writer's dream is to get the literary prize. But after all, I believe that literature must serve a cause. And for once, to come and say that literature serves the cause of humanity, serves the cause of peace, is to me the highest compliment ever given to any possible person living under the sun.
In 1986, Wiesel was paid another compliment, this time the Congressional Gold Medal of Achievement, but never missing an opportunity, he used that stage for a dramatic appeal.
Mr. President, there was a degree of suffering and loneliness in the concentration camps that defies imagination.
On national television, he pleaded with President Reagan not to visit the West German military cemetery at Bitburg, where members of Hitler's SS are buried.
That place, Mr. President, is not your place. Your place is with the victims of the SS.
Despite his protest, Reagan went to Bitburg. But Wiesel's plea had a lasting resonance. He will never forget.
I've studied psychiatry at the beginning of my life. And we know very well that to suppress a memory is dangerous, because when it comes back with fury. Now, can you imagine if society would suppress these memories? Or they would come back with extraordinary force, destructive force. It is for the sake of humanity that we must remember more and more and better and better. In the back of my mind, or in my deep depth of my heart, I knew that what is important is to save people. In other words, to save one human being, to me, is probably more important, even now, than all the 30 books that I have written and all the 40 years that I have lived. And I would go further. If I could save one child now from hunger or from prison or from humiliation, it would, to me, be as important as the prize itself.
Dear Elie Wiesel, we have been told that you said when your son was born that you felt sorry for him coming into this ugly and evil world. Yes, we can understand your feelings. Maybe one shouldn't give birth to children in a world like ours. After a second thought, however, you drew a different conclusion, thinking of yourself as a link in a long, long chain of generations, also including generations to come. You felt you had no right to break that chain. And you also felt it was, after all, not a good idea that 3,500 years of history should suddenly end with you. So you said, I took the 3,500 years and put them on the shoulders of the little child. And Elie Wiesel, because you did so, I think it would be appropriate that your son, with such a precious burden on his shoulders, should follow you up to the podium when you receive the Peace Prize.
According to the Jewish tradition, there are moments when one must make a blessing, give a benediction. This is such a moment. With your permission, Your Majesty, I would like to say that blessing. Baruch Shechianu. וקימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Thank you, O Lord, for giving us this day. And it is with a profound sense of humility that I accept the honor, the highest there is, that you have chosen to bestow upon me. I know your choice transcends my person. Do I have the right to represent the multitudes who have perished, of whom you have spoken? Do I have the right to accept this great honor on their behalf? Does anyone? I do not. No one may speak for the dead. No one may interpret their mutilated dreams and visions. And yet, at moments such as this, at all moments, I sense their presence. I always do. The presence of my parents, that of my little sister. Of course, since I am a Jew profoundly rooted in my people's memory and tradition, my first response is to Jewish fears, Jewish needs, Jewish crises. But I am also, of course, committed to Soviet Jews who need freedom, and Jews in Arab lands who need solidarity. But I said that Jewish priorities are my first priorities. They are not exclusive. Others are important to me. Other people, other ideas, other situations, other tragedies matter to me. There is so much injustice and suffering crying out for our attention. Victims of hunger, of racism, and political persecution. And therefore, I know that as long as one dissident is in prison, our freedom will not be true. As long as one child is hungry, our lives will be filled with anguish and shame, for I have seen children hungry. But all these victims need, above all, is to know that they are not alone, that we are not forgetting them. Our lives no longer belong to us, no longer belong to us alone. They belong to all those who need us desperately. And therefore I say, thank you, Chairman Egil Orvik, and thank you, the very distinguished members of the Nobel Committee. And thank you, people of Norway. Thank you, people of Norway, for declaring on this singular occasion that our survival has meaning for mankind.
This presentation was made possible by the generous support of Ernst & Young and Park Davis, a division of Warner Lambert Company.